So reading as a predictor of success is well researched. So it's not a question of whether it should happen, it's a question of why, right? And what kind. So we are going to be reading whether, I want to separate reading from books for a little, because whether you're reading online or you're reading for academics, reading, even if you're reading directions, you need reading. So question is, how do we then do it at home? Unless you're going to have a rich culture that is going to encourage reading, it's not something that you can expect a school to do, and there's going to be a reader at school and it's going to work. So you're going to have to do it because we want for children to know that there is different kinds of experiences, and we can't go and experience everything. So how would it be to be in someone's shoes? Empathy is something that we need. So we are going to have to do it because we want our kids to be empathetic. We want for them to see diversity. And we can't always, we have very middle class setups where nowadays more and more we begin to meet people more like us who are studying in the same schools and doing the same things. So how do I then get into the viewpoint of someone who's not like me and what they have gone through, for me to just understand a lot more the society around me? So these are different reasons, I think, why we should do it. And home, because it's the best place to do it, honestly. Schools are there, but our home influences are very, very strong. Even now, even in these nuclear setups, even with the screen, our home is still where a lot of the work still gets done. If we do it separately, say parents and teachers, parents, if I had to pick my 5 top or 4 top points, make sure you have books at home. Because it's never going to be so perfect that you will go to a library and just borrow what you will and then you will finish. And then suddenly something, they read something in this book and they'll spark off a question that requires an encyclopedia. And it'll be lovely to have a basic setup at home. So definitely have books lying around at home, age-appropriate books, and hopefully books that are of interest to kids. Read yourself, because children are going to do what we do, and they know the difference between what we tell them to do and what we actually do. So if we are going to be on our phones and our setups, which, it's not, we have to have the screen around, it's not an option, but we also need to show them that we are reading, whether it's on a Kindle or on a book, the fact that we are looking at it, and be readers ourselves. Have discussions, rich discussions about books. Say someone is reading, especially as your kids grow older, and they don't need for you to read aloud, though we have to read aloud anyways. Have discussions about books. So suppose your kid is reading To Kill a Mockingbird, read it yourself again maybe, and have discussions with them, and bring out, I think that's when you take it one level higher in terms of thinking. And read aloud, whether they need to or not. Our culture is, as long as they can read, we read aloud to them. And after that, when we think that they can read, reading is much more than just being able to decode the words on the page. And it's also a very community memory building activity, even as a parenting thing. When we read aloud, maybe we can pick then books that they may not pick by themselves and introduce them to new genres, or we can have a book that we really love that we want to share with them. Hopefully it's not imposed, but it's like a discussion. Books like the Mahabharata, which at some levels are very high for kids, and at other levels are, they have all these questions about it. So if we can openly read it out and have these discussions, because lovely questions come up, and these are the questions we want for them to go with and not, cut them off. So I think reading aloud, having books around, reading ourselves, and making sure that we have discussions around these books would be 4 points I have. For teachers, this is like the golden age of publishing for kids. Especially in Indian writing, we have these fact plus fiction books. So I can teach you about the 1857 revolution or about science, and then I have books that take these same concepts and have adventures and people and characters and stories that talk about it. So some children will learn really well from non-fiction, but many others learn very well from fiction. So there's really no reason for us to not bring these books, and there are books about math, science, social science, anything we consider a subject that is academic at school, we have books related to that. And have this concept of a class library. So in your class, you have some books, and kids are allowed to check books out every day, and that also is like this phenomenal independence activity, that they have their register and they pick it out, and then they are responsible to go put the book back at the end of the day. And suppose someone is going to finish their activity soon. You're done, it's a 20-minute activity, and they're done in 10 minutes, and it's right, and they've done their stuff. Is there any reason they can't pick up a book and get their learning done, even if it is not math period learning and science period learning, but as long as it is learning and skills that they can pick it up? As a behavior management tool, you keep the really, the challenging ones engaged doing their stuff, and they're learning something important. So that's something, two things I think are things that teachers can do. So there are the superficial, well, to me superficial, right, which is important still, but things like the font, the version, how, how is it bound? Is it bound with the words too close to the margin that I have to kind of struggle with? So there are things like that, the paper quality, the size of the book itself. Is it too small and it's like too thick? Because if it's really thick, then kids can be put off sometimes by the volume. So those are things that I think as you go along, you get a sense of as you pick up. There are also these guidelines we can use, like the Newbery, thing, the Good Book Awards for India. There are a bunch of these things that I kind of keep an eye on, and certain websites as well that relate to books. Then when it comes to the content, it's that, like, obviously the most important thing. First, the story has to be nicely told, and it would be good if teachers and librarians read at least a few of these books and had an idea about what, is the story something that we like, what do we want to pick up from that. It doesn't have to be, this whole concept of moral stories doesn't work. So it can't be moralizing, it has to be on, in our reality that our kids are going to engage with. So that's why Indian writing in English, because we are talking about English literature, Indian writing or even translated works like Biti Bhushan Bandopadhyay's book, that's I think Mountains of the Moon or something like that, which is translated. Now it's translated because I can't read it in original Bengali, but I'd much rather read an English version and know vernacular literature. Then looking at diversity, what are the themes about? Do we want to talk about different kinds of families? For example, Andalib Wajid's book talks about single parenting and what happens when a mother goes away. These are also like, it's an imagination theme, right? We take mothers for granted, they're always there. Some stereotype breaking on what happens, when a mom is going to go away. Things like adoption, Hot Chocolate is Thicker Than Blood by Rupa Gulab. It's for a higher age group of when an older kid finds out that they're adopted and what goes through their mind. A way of beautifully bringing in adoption to say that a family is like everything else, but also that there is a difference and how do we handle it. For little kids on adoption is this book called A Simple Wish, very, very nicely done, with, nice combination of pictures and words. And societal issues, like how do I deal with children who have different needs? We have Wings to Fly by Malti Holla's story on, how she went about becoming an athlete in a wheelchair. Why Are You Afraid to Hold My Hand, which is from the perspective of a kid in a wheelchair, to say that, I'm still only a kid. For our kids to start getting all of these from a very young age. And then when it comes to societal issues, there is Faces in the Water by Ranjit Lal. I think people should look at a diverse number of things. Like, I want to talk about the Kashmir problem, so can I look at No Guns at My Son's Funeral by Paro Anand? I want to think about what is the caste system, what are we talking about? Ranjit Lal is about female infanticide. Also have protagonists who are both male and female and a combination of it, not go only one way or the other. These are certain guidelines for people to pick up books, I think. So the library should actually be the focus around which all your hubs go. Now, when you're looking at a school, we have the academic part, which has to be supported, yes. But now there are also many, many other things that we have to do. We need safe spaces in schools. We need areas where kids can discuss and understand stuff. We need places which foster empathy, and where else except books. So as a library, we want it to be a space that is vibrant and exciting for children to walk in by themselves. And that ends up being the responsibility of the adults to start with, until that ball gets rolling. So we want activities in there. We want a librarian who reads books, and hopefully a bunch of teachers who know what their kids are reading. These are areas, these are ways in which we can support the library. Now we're looking at how the library supports you. Pretty much anything that you're teaching your kids as a concept or as an idea or actual academics, we have support in the library, right? Non-fiction sometimes, fiction sometimes. We talked about how we have this combination of, I'm taking a kid and I'm putting her in Chola, the Chola times, and she's having an adventure. My kid is going to read about the adventure with excitement and pick up Chola facts as they go along, right? Then we have books on the history of India, which is for children. And we have books on the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, these are all things in which children are going to learn, reflect, which is what we want. We want lifelong learners to go beyond the classroom. And where else in school beyond the classroom except the library? So we need to get to a point where the library is not looked at as something we have because CBSE says we should have it with a certain amount of books and a budget, but actually start curating and thinking and linking it up to the syllabus. And that again becomes the librarian's point to say, what are the kids studying and how can we then do it? So we want like the symbiotic setup where the people come to us. And teachers, what about the adults in the system? We want them reading. We want them reading about teaching, learning. We also want for them to know what's happening in the kids' world. And sometimes as parents, teachers are also parents, and many of them are, they don't have to be. They want to know what their kid is reading. So this is what they're saying. They can come to the librarian and say, is this acceptable for this age or not? Is this appropriate? What would you suggest? And go back even as parents themselves. The library is, in my opinion, in my biased opinion, the best space in a school. I agonized over this, and this is a 5. So how I've made my peace with it is, today this is my 5, tomorrow it will be something else, because I feel it's really hard. And the good thing that means is this is the golden age of publishing for kids, because we had Enid Blyton's and not much else beyond that, but now our kids have so much more. So I also tried to keep some kind of a subject focus, if you want it, because we are talking about schools and stuff. So a book like Starcurst by Nandini Vajpayee and Red Turtle. This is a book about it. So there is history and there's math, and then there is women empowerment. Like in life, right? There is not one thread that goes through. So this is about Bhaskara's, maybe he had a daughter and how she went through her life. There is a little romance in it as well, just very innocent, beautiful romance that I think will be great for older kids. There is this book called Mathmatwist by T.V. Padma, who's another phenomenal author. So maybe next time I'll pick 5 authors and try and sneak in more books. But these are stories about math by Tulika. That's one of the things. And then, so when you think about books, it doesn't have to be a chapter book which is just text dense. We have lovely graphic novels. So this is Jagdish and the Talking Plant by Tulika again. And again, one of those fact plus fiction books that talks about how J.C. Bose actually went ahead and got his inventions, how he pioneered it. And then it comes to things like at a certain age, I know beyond a certain point, especially at school, we have children losing their grandparents. And it's a shock to see death. Sometimes that's the first time you have death. So a book like Gone Grandmother, beautifully illustrated and talks about, and it's a lovely mix of we want for children to read pictures as well and emotions from pictures. And then there are also words, but the words don't have everything. So it's a combination of how you read it, and it talks about how a child loses their grandmother, and talks about how hard it was for the parents as well, and have those discussions inside, and how they come to some terms with a hard topic. This is a favorite book as a publishing house, because I feel they are down to earth and they're trying to publish for the Indian audiences. They have lovely coloring books that are talking about Indian plants and flowers. But this talks about, so this is Brown Like Dosa, Samosa and Sticky Chicky by Fun OK. And it talks about complexion and how to be comfortable in your own skin, and how brown is beautiful, which is something I think as a culture we need to know. And I hope many adults are also going to read this book. And this is the 6th book that I snuck in, because I can't imagine not having this. I bought this for my daughter when she was 1 year old, way before I knew she was able to read. Not in this, it was in a different older version and everything. And we read it out loud, me and my kids. Phenomenal discussions about it, some kind of a grounding, trying to understand why someone did what they did. So Samhita Arni herself was 12 or 11, something like that, when she wrote it. So I loved the way she irreverently says things like, well, you think Yudhishthira would have learned his lesson by now. But no, he had to go again and say that he's going to gamble. So bringing out things like good choices. The Mahabharata by itself is a very rich ground for teaching moments. And this was phenomenal because I learned quite a bit as well. So my 5 under coercion are these.